I knew something was wrong the second the night administrator looked at me and didn't ask for my room number. It was past midnight, the lobby almost empty, lights dimmed low enough to feel intentional, like the hotel itself was trying to stay quiet. I'd just come in from the rain, jacket still damp, nerves tight in my chest, replaying everything that had happened upstairs. I didn't want to go back to my room. Not to that room. And somehow, he already knew. Dean stood behind the front desk, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly messy like he'd run his hands through it one too many times during a long shift. He wasn't scrolling on his phone or pretending to look busy like most night staff. He was watching me, calm, focused, almost like he'd been expecting me. "You don't want to go back to room 1, he said, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I stopped walking. For a second, I genuinely wondered if I'd said it out loud without realizing. My heart skipped, then started pounding harder. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I hadn't complained. I'd checked in earlier that evening, exhausted from travel, barely making eye contact with the day staff. There was no reason he should know anything. I cleared my throat. "What?" Dean tilted his head slightly, studying my face, then gave a small, knowing smile. Not creepy, not smug, just attentive. "You came down the elevator twice in the last 10 minutes, he said. "Didn't bring your key. And you've got that look." That look. I laughed under my breath, more out of nerves than humor. "That's very specific." "Night shifts make you observant," he replied. "Especially when someone looks like they're trying to convince themselves to leave instead of asking for help." I leaned my hands on the counter before I realized my legs were shaky. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning solution, the kind of neutral comfort hotels always try to project. Outside, rain streaked down the glass doors in uneven lines. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it," I said quickly. "It's probably nothing. I'm just not sleeping great." Dean didn't rush to type anything into the computer. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't give me the rehearsed line about hotel policy. Instead, he lowered his voice slightly. "Parker," he said, reading my name off the screen without breaking eye contact. "Nobody comes down here at 1 in the morning like that if it's nothing." That did it. The knot in my chest tightened. I hadn't even told myself the full truth yet, but hearing my name from him soft, steady made it harder to keep pretending. Room 1 had felt wrong the moment I'd stepped inside. Too quiet. Too isolated. Ground floor. End of the hall. Only one neighboring room and no noise from it. I'd brushed it off at first, told myself I was being paranoid. Then there were the sounds. Subtle. Not constant. Just enough to make me question whether they were real. "I just don't feel safe in there," I admitted quietly. "I know how that sounds." Dean's expression didn't change. No judgment. No skepticism. "It doesn't sound like anything," he said. "It sounds like your gut talking." He finally turned to the keyboard, typing something in with deliberate slowness. The soft clicking filled the silence between us. "I can move you," he continued. "Different floor. Different wing. No extra charge." Relief washed over me so fast, it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you," I said, probably too quickly. Seriously, I didn't want to be that guest. Dean glanced back up at me, lips twitching. "Parker," he said, "my job is literally to keep people from having a bad night." He slid a new key card across the counter toward me, his fingers brushing mine for just a second longer than necessary. I noticed. I was pretty sure he did too. As I picked it up, he added, almost casually, "If you need anything else, I'll be here until morning." Something in the way he said it made my stomach flip. I nodded, holding the key a little tighter than I needed to, and headed back toward the elevators, this time with a different room number and a strange, unexpected awareness that the night hadn't settled yet. Not even close. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. I stood alone inside it, new keycard warm between my fingers, watching the numbers climb while my reflection stared back at me in the mirrored wall. I looked tired. Not just jet-lag tired, but that wired, on-edge kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to ignore your instincts for too long. Dean's voice replayed in my head. "It sounds like your gut talking." The doors opened on the 5th floor with a soft chime. Immediately, it felt different. Brighter somehow. Carpet cleaner instead of damp air. I walked down the hallway, found my new room, and hesitated before opening the door half, expecting that same tight feeling in my chest. Nothing. The room was normal. Comfortably boring. 2 beds, city view, faint hum of traffic outside. I dropped my bag on the floor and exhaled, slow and shaky, like my body had finally gotten permission to relax. Still, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, staring at the door. My phone buzzed with a notification I ignored. Instead, my mind drifted back downstairs to the way Dean had watched me, like he was tuned in to a frequency no one else bothered with. The brush of his fingers, the calm certainty in his voice. After 10 minutes of doing nothing but overthinking, I grabbed my jacket again. I told myself I was just going down to grab water. The lobby looked even quieter now. Softer lights. Night stretched thin around the glass doors. Dean was still there, leaning against the counter, reading something on his tablet. When he looked up and saw me, his eyebrows lifted slightly. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, the room's fine. Way better." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Good." I hovered there awkwardly, suddenly aware that I hadn't planned what to say next. He seemed to sense it, because he set the tablet aside. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I let out a breath. "Not really." "Want some bad coffee?" he offered. "It's been sitting there since midnight, so it's basically hotel tradition." I laughed, surprised at how easy it felt. "Sure, why not?" He poured 2 cups and handed one to me, then leaned back against the desk again, arms crossed loosely. Up close, I noticed small things, the faint shadow of stubble, the tired but kind look in his eyes. He looked my age, maybe early 30s. "So," he said, "what actually happened in room 1? I hesitated. He didn't push. He just waited. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Nothing concrete. I just felt, watched. And then I heard something. Like movement. But every time I checked, nothing was there." Dean nodded slowly, like he'd heard this kind of thing before. "You're not the first guest to hate that room," he said. "Ground floor. End of the hall. People underestimate how much layout messes with your head." "That makes me feel slightly better," I said. "Good," he replied. Then, quieter. "But for what it's worth, I would have moved you even if you couldn't explain it." I looked at him. "Why?" He met my eyes, steady. "Because you were uncomfortable." "That's enough." Something shifted then. Not dramatic. Just closer. Like the space between us had narrowed without either of us stepping forward. We stood there sipping bad coffee at 1 in the morning, 2 strangers sharing a pocket of quiet that felt oddly safe. The lobby clock ticked softly behind us. "I'm Parker," I said, even though he already knew. "Dean," he replied, like we were doing this properly now. A pause. Comfortable. Charged. "Well," I said eventually, "I should probably try sleeping again." He nodded, but his gaze lingered. "If you need anything at all, just come down." "I might," I said, and this time, I didn't mean water. As I turned toward the elevator, I felt his eyes on my back. And for the first time that night, the thought didn't make me uneasy at all. I did try to sleep. I lay there with the lights off, city glow leaking in through the curtains, staring at the ceiling while my brain refused to shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, my thoughts drifted back downstairs to Dean's voice, low and steady, to the way he hadn't dismissed me or made me feel ridiculous, to the fact that, for the first time that night, I'd felt seen. Around 2:30 a.m., I gave up. I wasn't anxious anymore. That was the strange part. I just felt restless, like unfinished business had been left hanging in the air between the 5th floor and the lobby. So I went back down. The elevator opened to the same quiet calm, but this time Dean was standing, stretching his arms above his head like he'd been sitting too long. His shirt lifted slightly, exposing a strip of skin at his waist before he noticed me and quickly dropped his arms. "Hey," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. Not annoyance. If anything, he looked pleased. "Hey," I replied. "Sorry. I know I'm probably being that guest now." He shook his head. "You're not. I'm just glad you're not coming down because something else went wrong." "No," I said. "Nothing's wrong. I just couldn't sleep." Dean studied my face for a moment, then gestured toward the seating area off to the side of the lobby, 2 armchairs and a low table that looked like no one ever used them. "You want to sit?" he asked. "Makes the night go faster." I nodded, and we settled into the chairs, angled slightly toward each other. From here, the front desk felt less like a barrier and more like a formality. Just 2 guys awake while the rest of the world slept. "So," he said, resting his elbows on his knees, "what brings you to town?" "Work," I replied. "Conference." I flew in thinking it'd be a quick in-and-out thing, but now I'm kind of glad it's not. Even with the creepy room situation, especially because of that? I said, then immediately wondered if that sounded too much like a line. If it did, Dean didn't call me out on it. He just smiled. I've been on nights here for almost a year, he said. You'd be surprised how many people end up telling me things they didn't plan to. Like what? He shrugged. Regrets. Breakups. Stuff they're running from. Stuff they're afraid to go back to. I swallowed. And what do you think I'm running from? He didn't answer right away. His gaze softened, not probing, just curious. I think, he said slowly, you're tired of pretending you're fine when you're not. That landed harder than I expected. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. That obvious, huh? To someone who works nights, he said. Yeah. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Somewhere, an ice machine hummed. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on wet pavement. You know, Dean added, I could get in trouble for this. For what? I asked. For not keeping things strictly professional. I looked at him, really looked at him. And are we not doing that? His mouth curved into a slow, deliberate smile. Depends how you define professional. My pulse picked up. I should probably go back upstairs, I said, not moving. You could, he replied, also not moving. Another pause. Thicker this time. Dean stood first. Walk with me, he said. I need to do a floor check anyway. We headed toward the elevator together, standing close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Almost. The doors closed, and for a brief second, the world shrank to just the two of us and the quiet hum of the lift. Neither of us spoke. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, Dean glanced at me, his expression unreadable but warm. Room 512, I said. He nodded. I know. That made my stomach flip. We stopped outside my door. The hallway was empty, hushed, like it was holding its breath. Well, I said, fingers curling around the keycard. Thanks for everything tonight. Dean hesitated, then stepped just a little closer. Not enough to trap me. Just enough to make his presence undeniable. You're welcome, Parker, he said softly. And for what it's worth. He leaned in, close enough that I could feel his breath near my ear. I'm glad you didn't go back to room 1. Neither of us moved after that. Not yet. The moment stretched. Dean was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something subtle, clean, not trying too hard. My hand was still wrapped around the keycard, knuckles tight, like it was the only thing anchoring me to common sense. I should go, I said again. You don't sound like you want to, he replied quietly. That was the problem. I didn't. I unlocked the door, the soft beep echoing too loudly in the empty hallway. For a second, I thought that was it, that we'd exchange a look, maybe a smile, and he'd turn back toward the elevator. Instead, he hesitated. Can I come in? Dean asked. Not confident, not casual, just honest. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I searched his face for any hint of pressure, any expectation. There wasn't one. Just patience. Yeah, I said. You can. The door closed behind us with a muted click. The room was dim, lit only by the city lights filtering through the curtains. Dean stayed near the door at first, hands in his pockets, like he was reminding himself he could leave at any moment. I appreciated that more than I could put into words. Nice upgrade, he said lightly, glancing around. Much less haunted, I replied. He chuckled, then looked back at me, the humor fading into something softer. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, I am. I think I just didn't want the night to end. Like that. Like what? Alone, I admitted. Dean took a step closer. Then another. Still slow. Still giving me space to change my mind. You're not, he said. Not right now. My breath caught, just slightly. We stood there, close enough now that there was no pretending this was just friendly concern. His hand lifted, hovering near my arm, waiting. You can tell me to stop, he said. I shook my head. Don't. His fingers brushed my sleeve first, tentative, then slid to my wrist. Warm. Steady. The contact sent a quiet shiver through me, not the rush of something reckless, but the calm of something intentional. This is probably crossing a line, he murmured. Then why does it feel like we've both been standing on it all night? I asked. That earned a small smile. Dean leaned in, forehead resting briefly against mine. No rush. No grabbing. Just closeness. I could feel his breath, hear it slow to match mine. The kiss, when it came, was soft, almost cautious, like we were both checking in with each other through it. His lips lingered, pulled back, then returned with a little more certainty. I exhaled into it, my hand finding his forearm, fingers curling there like they belonged. When we finally separated, neither of us spoke for a moment. "I should go," Dean said quietly, though his hand hadn't left mine. "I know," I said, "but I'm really glad you didn't yet." He smiled, thumb brushing once over my knuckles. It promised more than a touch. "Try to get some sleep, Parker," he said. "I'll be downstairs." "And if I can't?" I asked. His eyes met mine, warm and unguarded. "Then you know where to find me." He stepped back, giving me one last look before slipping out the door. I stood there long after it closed, heart steady, chest warm, knowing one thing for sure. I wasn't afraid of the night anymore. I did sleep. Not right away, but when I finally did, it was deep and dreamless, the kind of rest that only comes when your body decides it's safe enough to let go. When I woke up, pale morning light was spilling through the curtains, and for a split second I forgot where I was. Then I remembered Dean's hand around my wrist. His voice in the hallway. "I'm glad you didn't go back to room 1. My phone read 7:18 a.m. I lay there longer than necessary, staring at the ceiling again, but this time, my thoughts weren't spiraling. They were grounded, warm, expectant. I showered, dressed, and packed slowly, like I was deliberately stretching time. The conference didn't start until noon. I had nowhere I needed to be, except downstairs. The elevator doors opened to a brighter lobby, morning energy creeping in through the windows. A couple of early checkouts rolled suitcases across the tile. Someone complained quietly about parking. Normal life, resuming. Dean was still there. Same desk, same posture, different light. In daylight, he looked softer, somehow less guarded. When he saw me, his expression shifted instantly. Not surprise, recognition. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, suddenly aware of my heartbeat again. We locked eyes for a fraction of a second, too long for two people who were definitely pretending nothing had happened. Then he cleared his throat. "Sleep okay?" he asked, professional tone back in place, but not quite all the way. "Yeah," I said. "Best sleep I've had in weeks." He nodded once, like that mattered. I hesitated, then stepped closer to the desk, lowering my voice. "Listen, about last night, Dash." Dean leaned in too, resting his forearms on the counter. "You don't need to explain anything." "I know," I said. "I just didn't want you to think I regret it." That got me a look. Slow, careful, honest. "I don't," he said quietly. Something loosened in my chest. A guest approached the desk then, asking about late checkout. Dean straightened, handled it smoothly, like he'd done it 1,000 times. I stepped back, giving him space, watching him work. There was something strangely intimate about seeing him like that, competent, calm, fully in his element. This wasn't some fantasy version of him. This was real. When the guest left, Dean looked back at me. "You checking out today?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," I said. A pause. "Well," he replied, "that gives us time." I smiled despite myself. "Does it?" He glanced around the lobby, then lowered his voice just enough. "I get off at 8. My stomach flipped. Again. "I'll be around," I said. "Conference and all." "Of course," he said, lips curving slightly. "Pure coincidence if we run into each other later." I started toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Hey, Dean." "Yeah. Thanks for listening last night. Not just doing your job." His expression softened. "You're welcome, Parker. And for what it's worth, Dash." He stopped himself, then finished. "I'm really glad you came back down." So was I. As I stepped outside into the morning air, the city buzzing back to life, one thought settled comfortably in my mind. Sometimes the safest place isn't a room number. Sometimes it's a person. The conference was a blur. I sat through panels, nodded at slides, made polite small talk with people whose names I forgot the second they told me. Every so often, my phone buzzed with emails I half-read. My mind kept drifting back to the lobby, to a rolled-up pair of sleeves, to the way Dean had said that gives us time, like it was something gentle and deliberate. By the time evening rolled around, my social battery was dead. I skipped the networking dinner, claiming exhaustion, and headed back to the hotel just after 7. The sky outside was turning that deep blue that feels heavier than night, city lights flickering on one by one. I changed into something casual: jeans, a clean t-shirt, then sat on the edge of the bed, checking the time. 7:58. I told myself I was just going downstairs to grab a drink from the bar. The lobby was quieter again, settling into its nighttime rhythm. A different energy than the morning, slower, more intimate. Dean was still behind the desk, finishing something on the computer. When he looked up and saw me, The corner of his mouth lifted. Long day, he asked. You have no idea, I replied. Please tell me you're about to be free. He glanced at the clock. In about 2 minutes. I waited, leaning against a pillar nearby, watching him wrap things up. There was a strange comfort in the mundanity of it, keys being logged, notes being typed, the world neatly handed off to the next shift. At exactly 8, another staff member appeared from the back. Dean exchanged a few quiet words with them, then grabbed his jacket from under the desk. He walked over to me. Suddenly, just Dean again, not night administrator, not the guy who saved me from room 1. Just him. So, he said, slipping his jacket on. Still up for that coincidence? I smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We stepped outside together, the cool air hitting my face. The city sounded different at night, less rushed, more honest. We walked side by side without rushing, hands brushing occasionally, neither of us pretending not to notice. Can I be honest? I asked after a block or two. Always, he said. I wasn't expecting any of this, I admitted. I came here thinking I'd be counting down the hours until I could leave. And now, he asked. And now, I said, glancing at him. I'm kind of glad I checked in. He laughed softly. Me too. We stopped at a small bar near the hotel, nothing fancy, just warm lights and low music. We found a corner table, ordered drinks, and talked. Really talked. About past relationships. About jobs we weren't sure we wanted forever. About the strange intimacy of night shifts and hotel rooms and temporary places. At some point, his knee bumped mine under the table and didn't move away. Neither did mine. When we left, it was late again. The streets were quiet, the hotel glowing ahead of us like a familiar landmark. Back in the elevator, the silence returned, but it felt different now. Comfortable. Charged with possibility. Tomorrow, I said softly, I check out. Dean nodded, eyes on the numbers lighting up. I know. That doesn't mean this has to end tonight, I added. He turned to me then, really looked at me. I was hoping you'd say that too. The elevator slowed. Doors opening soon. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Room 1 was the furthest thing from my mind. The elevator doors opened on my floor, but neither of us moved right away. We stood there, just outside the threshold, like stepping out would force a decision neither of us was quite ready to name. The hallway was quiet, carpet swallowing the sound of our shoes, the soft glow of wall lights stretching shadows behind us. Well, Dean said, clearing his throat lightly, this is you. It is, I replied. Then, after a beat, you don't have to go. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he washed my face, like he was still checking, still making sure this was mutual, intentional. I want to stay, he said finally. I just don't want to assume. I smiled, nerves buzzing under my skin. Then don't assume. I'm asking. That was all it took. Inside the room, the door closed softly behind us, shutting out the rest of the hotel, the city, the temporary nature of everything else. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was anticipatory. Dean slipped off his jacket and set it over the chair, movements unhurried. I kicked off my shoes, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he was, how the air seemed warmer now. This feels different in here, he said quietly. Different how? I asked. Like it's not just a room anymore. I nodded. Yeah, I know what you mean. He stepped closer, slow enough that I could have stopped him at any point. I didn't. When his hands rested at my waist, it felt natural, like they'd already learned the shape of me in some other timeline. The kiss this time wasn't tentative. It was deeper, more sure, weeks of tension compressed into one moment. I felt it in my chest, in the way my hands found his shoulders without thinking, in the quiet sound he made when I pulled him closer. We broke apart only to breathe, foreheads touching. You okay? He asked softly. More than okay, I said honestly. We moved together toward the bed, not rushed, not clumsy, just present. Clothes were shed in stages, pauses filled with kisses, with laughter when someone fumbled, with the kind of eye contact that made everything feel grounding instead of overwhelming. There was nothing frantic about it. No need to prove anything. Just two men choosing each other in a borrowed space, aware of the clock, but refusing to let it dictate the moment. Later, we lay side by side, sheets tangled, the city glowing faintly beyond the curtains. Dean was propped on one elbow, tracing idle patterns on my arm. You know, he said, most people disappear from my life as soon as they check out. I turned my head toward him. And you think I will? I don't know, he admitted. But I kind of hope you don't. I smiled. Then maybe we don't treat this like a checkout. He studied me, then nodded slowly. I'd like that. We fell asleep like that, close, unguarded, not pretending this was anything less than what it was. In the morning, I'd pack my bags. I'd leave the hotel. But I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Because sometimes, the best part of a stay isn't the room at all. It's who's there when you don't want to go back alone. Morning came quietly. No alarm. No rush. Just soft light creeping across the bed and the steady rhythm of someone else breathing beside me. For a moment, I stayed completely still, afraid that moving would break whatever fragile, perfect balance the night had left behind. Dean was on his back, one arm resting above his head, eyes still closed. In daylight, he looked different, less guarded, more human. Like someone I could imagine in real life, not just in the strange bubble a hotel creates. I watched him longer than I should have. Eventually, he stirred, blinking awake, gaze finding mine almost immediately. "Hey," he said, voice low and rough with sleep. "Hey," I replied. A small smile appeared on his face, slow and genuine. "So, that wasn't a dream." "Nope," I said softly. "Still here." He exhaled, relieved. "Good. We didn't rush to get up. We talked instead about nothing important and everything that was. About where I was flying next. About how long he'd been meaning to quit nights, but never quite did. About how strange it was that one uncomfortable room could reroute an entire weekend. Eventually, reality knocked. Checkout time. I packed while Dean leaned against the window, hands in his pockets, pretending not to watch me fold my clothes. When my bag was zipped, the room suddenly felt smaller. Temporary again. Down in the lobby, the same place where all of this had started, we stood awkwardly for the first time since we'd met. "So," I said, "this is where guests usually disappear." Dean nodded. "Usually." I hesitated, then said it anyway. "I don't want to be one of those." He looked at me, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Then don't," he said. "Put your number in." I smiled, relief washing through me as I did. At the doors, we stopped. The city waited on the other side. My ride idled at the curb. "I'm really glad you listened to me," I said. "That first night." Dean met my eyes. "I'm really glad you trusted me." We hugged soft, lingering, neither of us pretending it was casual. When we pulled back, he added quietly, "Next time you're in town, I'll make sure you don't end up in room 1. I laughed. Next time, I might actually want to come back. As I stepped outside, I didn't look over my shoulder right away. But when I finally did, Dean was still standing there in the lobby, watching me go, not like a man waiting for a shift to end, but like someone waiting for a beginning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt certain of something simple and real. Some stays change you. Some people stay with you. And sometimes, the night administrator knows exactly what you need, even before you do.